Just want to start by thanking everyone at Rogers for inviting my son Daniel and I to be guest presenters here. I cannot begin to describe how honored and thrilled we both are to be here today for so many reasons. Just before our trip here, I read a quote from a friend responding to a post on Facebook about a news segment Daniel was featured in, highlighting some of his journey. The quote was, she said, "Use your mess as your message," and I thought that was just a really great quote. So I'd like to share a little bit of Daniel's story and our story together. And the story and journey that led us here today started out as an inconceivable mess, that is for sure. 5 years ago, when Daniel was 15, I feared that I had forever lost the son I once knew. For lack of a better way to describe it, it was as if an alien had come out of nowhere taking over his body and mind. He went from having an intermittent eye blinking tic to looking like he was having seizures in a matter of weeks. Sorry, I'm trying to compose myself here. It became quickly apparent that what doctors had earlier dismissed as an allergy was actually Tourette syndrome. But this was far from your average case of Tourette syndrome, and it didn't stop there. OCD came on with a vengeance, manifesting in form of severe, debilitating, superstitious obsessions. Daniel's symptoms developed into what has been labeled as Tourettic OCD, which is a complex combination of Tourette's and OCD, where the OCD starts driving the tics and the tics start driving the OCD. Talk about a mess? It was a mess. Among the countless tics that emerged was a high-pitched screeching tic that was so loud I literally had to wear earplugs to preserve my hearing, and there was concern that Daniel would damage his vocal cords. His tics became so severe that his forearms were covered in friction burns, and he got down to nearly 100 pounds from the constant physical exertion. He started spelling out most of his words because if he heard himself say his own words, it would incite horrible tic outbursts. He would lay across the middle of the stairs for hours every day and could not tolerate lights or sounds. Simple things like brushing his teeth or showering would result in debilitating tic outbursts, so he began fearing and avoiding most activities of daily living as a result. He had every tic under the sun, and quite literally, as one of his tics was actually staring at the sun. It seemed like a new tic was emerging daily, and I would go to sleep each night, holding my breath, fearful of what the next day would bring. I felt like I was living in a real-life horror movie. It was truly beyond belief. Daniel's symptoms progressed so quickly, I scrambled to keep up. First, it was a crash course in Tourette's, then a crash course in OCD, and then a crash course in Lyme when he tested positive for Lyme. I lost count on how many doctors and specialists we went to, from a neuropsychiatric Lyme specialist in New Jersey, to Tourette specialists at Johns Hopkins, to several neurologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, you name it, we were there. Daniel's case was so perplexing to everyone we saw that I submitted his history to the NIH, hoping someone there might take on his case. I found a partial hospitalization program in Virginia and admitted Daniel, but it quickly became apparent that they could not help him. Thankfully, they knew about Rogers, and they recommended I investigate Rogers for Daniel. But Wisconsin, how could I possibly send my only child in such a horrible state so far away from home? Well, thank God for the internet, where I found a support group for parents of children with OCD. Several members had children who had been to Rogers and had nothing but wonderful things to say. But still, I was very nervous about sending Daniel somewhere none of us had ever been and knew no one. What parent wouldn't be nervous? Well, the day we arrived at Rogers and met Bob Mills at the front of the Child Adolescent Center, I knew in my heart this was the place that Daniel needed to be. And what happened from that point on is nothing short of miraculous. I could go on for hours about the amazing staff and programs at Rogers, but to sum it all up, there's no question in my mind or in Daniel's mind that they saved Daniel's life. And not only did they save Daniel's life, but they saved my sanity. Talk about a mess. Not only was my only child profoundly ill, but at the very same time, I was going through a highly contentious divorce situation and barely had time to breathe trying to keep up with everything. Rogers not only came to Daniel's rescue, but also to my rescue. Knowing that Daniel was in such wonderful hands was a huge relief. However, that relief almost came to an abrupt end when I got the dreaded call one day that insurance would no longer approve ongoing treatment for Daniel when he was still so profoundly ill. After a few weeks of round-the-clock emails and phone calls, and many thanks to Rogers, fortunately, the denial was ultimately overturned. I think the insurance company got so sick of me by that point, they ended up approving Daniel's treatment for an additional 3 months to avoid dealing with me. Daniel went from Rogers to a wilderness program in Utah, and then to 2 residential treatment programs also in Utah. And then unfortunately, but really fortunately, he ended up back at Rogers a second time when he had a profound relapse. This time, insurance almost denied him even being admitted. We got past that hurdle, but then once again they denied continued coverage when he was still so ill. This time we weren't so lucky and the appeals were denied. Daniel's treatment team agreed that he was a candidate for the patient care grant. We are so grateful when he was approved for the grant, which enabled him to stay long enough to get the treatment he desperately needed. From there, Daniel stepped down to the intensive outpatient program at Rogers, which continued to help him immensely. And he ultimately returned back home to Virginia about 3 years ago. Before Daniel had initially gone to Rogers, I was trying desperately to find treatment and programs to help him, and it was extremely difficult to find that. He always loved music, and I had located a music therapy program in our area, but I wasn't able to start Daniel in the program back then because he was just too sick. When we returned home after his second stay at Rogers, we investigated the music therapy program again, and Daniel began participating. It was life-changing for him. He was struggling a fair amount at that time, and after being away for nearly 2 years, it was difficult to readjust to being home. Most of his peers had moved on to college, and Daniel was very isolated socially. Not only did he find an amazing group of peers through the music therapy program, but he has grown so much through this program, which is very appropriately called a place to be. Daniel's self-confidence and social skills improved dramatically, and he started sharing his story and performing along with other kids and young adults with varying life challenges through a touring show that visits middle and high schools in our area. This show has now been seen by over 30,000 students, teachers, parents, and others. Daniel and his castmates in the show are dealing with everything from traumatic brain injury to cerebral palsy, Lyme disease, anxiety, OCD, and a variety of other life challenges. And they are all such an inspiration to so many people. This past year, the music therapy program launched a new touring music production that addresses suicide prevention and mental health issues, which Daniel also participates in, and it's called A Will to Survive. The response to this show has been incredible, and I'm very excited to share that the Kennedy Center has invited the cast to perform there this coming fall. The healing power... Thank you. It's an amazing, I just have to say it's an amazing show that is just life-changing and just phenomenal, and I hope one day you can all somehow see it. The healing power of music is truly amazing. It has helped Daniel so much in his life, and I'm so thrilled to know that patients at Rogers are able to engage in music therapy. In closing, I just want to say that Daniel and I are forever grateful to everyone at Rogers for everything they did for Daniel, and they do for so many kids, teens, and adults who are dealing with mental health struggles. I shudder to think where Daniel may be now if it had not been for Rogers and the amazing staff and treatment they provided. So now, without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to invite my son Daniel to the stage. Thank you all so much for being here today.